From the Spec Network, this is Fragmented, an Android developer podcast where we talk about building good software and becoming better Android developers. I'm Donn Felker.
And I'm Kaushik Gopal.
Welcome to the show.
This episode of Fragmented is brought to you by Instabug. If you go to instabug.com/fragmented, you can sign up for free, and within 1 minute, you'll integrate it to your application, and you can get Instabug's brand new t-shirt for free. And whether you're developing your application or if it's already live and has tons of end users, bugs and crashes can turn out to be your worst nightmare. They can delay your application's release, they can cause issues that spoil the user experience, all of which can lead to churn and negative reviews. Instabug can help you eliminate this nightmare as it significantly decreases the amount of time spent on finding the issues and reproducing them so that you can focus on what matters. Users can easily report these issues by shaking their phone, which enables them to generate a screenshot, which they can also draw upon, or they can even attach a voice note or a screen recording as well. This is all done right within the app with zero interruption to their experience. For you, you'll get a dashboard that shows you a comprehensive report that includes all the device details, steps to reproduce their bug, network logs, stack traces, you name it, all types of information so that you can debug faster and release with more confidence and get the users back on track. Additionally, you can reply to your users right from your Instabug dashboard so that you can let them know that their issue is fixed, or you can also reach out to them if you need any other clarification or information from them regarding that situation. I don't want to forget to mention that you can also integrate Instabug with any of the existing tools that you also use and forward those reports to tools such as Jira, Slack, Trello, GitHub, Zendesk, or whatever else that you may use. If this sounds interesting to you, you'll want to visit instabug.com/fragmented where you can sign up for free, get that SDK installed, and get that new Instabug t-shirt. Thanks, Instabug. It's been a while since we've done a developer growth here on Fragmented. For those that aren't familiar, the developer growth kind of mini-series that I've decided to start here on the Fragmented podcast started back at episode 154. And on episode 154, I talked about how you should start writing. And to do so, you should create a blog and start sharing all of the knowledge that you have, even if it's only something minute, like a weird error message that when you Googled for an answer to what could be the problem, you received no results. Just by sharing that small solution that you may have figured out, you will have helped hundreds, if not thousands, of other developers in the future. And then I've kind of dove into that deeper. If you're interested, be sure to check out episode number 154. I'll put a link in the show notes. That's Developer Growth, Start Writing. Today, though, I want to talk about something similar, and that's to start speaking, public speaking in general. Now, it's been reported through various different outlets that there are a few things people fear more than death, and one of those is very often public speaking. And I can definitely relate to that. And as a lot of people know here, I have done a lot of public speaking over the years. In fact, after taking a little bit of time off from it recently, I'm getting back into the swing of things, and I will be presenting at various different conferences all over the world. But I always wasn't a person that would get in front of a crowd of people. In fact, back in the late 90s, I was just getting into computers at the time. And I got a job at Charles Schwab. And for those of you who are out of the States, Charles Schwab is a brokerage firm that basically you can have brokerage accounts and you can trade stocks and so forth. And I was going there to be a stockbroker. Now, I vividly remember the first day we were sitting in a small auditorium with the seats in a very theater style, kind of slanted upwards. There was probably about 25 of us in our new higher orientation class. And one of the things that the HR department wanted us to do was just go around the room and say what department you were going to be working in, what your name was, what your background is, just kind of that basic information, just so you kind of build some rapport. When I heard this, I was paralyzed with fear. I didn't want to stand up in front of these 25 people, and there was probably only 22 people now that I think of it. It was actually maybe even smaller, but it sure seemed like a ton of people. And finally, as I saw, I don't even know anyone in that room. I don't even know what they said, because as soon as they said, You have to talk about yourself. I immediately didn't know what I was going to say. I didn't know how I was going to say it. I started sweating profusely. I was just paranoid and just riddled with fear. And this is a very real thing that most people face when they think about public speaking. And back then, I didn't think about public speaking. In fact, I never thought I'd ever want to get on stage and do public speaking. But eventually, as people started going around the room and talking about themselves literally for 20 or 30 seconds, I could feel the anxiety growing and welling within me quite a bit. And it was at this point in time when I almost blacked out. Finally, my turn to present who I was came around. I stood up. My vision got kind of very narrow and focused, really hazy and black around the edges. Usually this is a precursor to actually passing out. Thankfully, I didn't pass out that day, but I got very close. I sweated through my shirt. It was crazy. And I said who I was. I probably stuttered, spit my words out very rough. And anyone who's ever spoken to me personally knows that I don't speak like that. And I didn't speak like that then on a one-to-one basis. But being in front of those few people really gave me insurmountable fear, just anxiety, etc. And what I eventually realized is like, that's something I don't ever want to happen again. Like, I have to figure out a way around this. Now, I can't say that I can give you a definite answer of like, here's how you do that. But the one thing that worked for me is actually just approaching that fear. And it wasn't until probably 6 or 7 years later when I gave my first talk. And I've probably mentioned this on the podcast a couple of times. The first talk I ever gave was a introduction to dependency injection for .NET. And this was right around 2006 or 7. And this is when dependency injection in .NET was starting to take off. I signed up for a code camp in Phoenix and said I will do a talk on dependency injection because not really many people knew it at the time. And I really loved it. I thought it was a great pattern. And I wanted to talk about the libraries and tools that I was using and how it was helping benefit me and my teams and how it could help other people. Because I had a really hard time learning it and I wanted to share that knowledge. And so I thought it would be kind of fun to share that knowledge. I knew I'd have to get on stage and speak in front of people. And I knew it would be scary, but I knew this is something I wanted to overcome in my life and just say, hey, you know what? I went and spoke in front of people. It's kind of a bucket list thing. Just like, hey, go do this and you can say you've done it. And that day finally approached. I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear getting on that stage. This was a desert code camp in Phoenix. And if you happen to be in the area, I think Desert Code Camp is still run. So definitely check it out, volunteer there. It's a great event still to this day. But back then there was about 600 or 700 people that would show up to this code camp. It was very large, and there would be multiple tracks running around at once. And my track, which was the .NET track, they had the software that they had built that depending upon how popular your talk was, because people could say, hey, I want to go to this talk, they could then properly plan the room that you would go into because they hosted it at a college. And so if you're talking on a really obscure topic and only a few people were going to go, they're going to put you in a smaller room. That just kind of makes sense. It is what it is. If you were talking about something popular, they're going to put you in a much larger room so it could accommodate the people in there. Well, as I posted my talk, it kind of went from a normal sized room to a little bit larger, and then eventually it went to the auditorium. And for my talk, the first time I spoke in front of people, I had over 170 people in the audience. When I learned this, again, paranoia, fear, anxiety, everything crept up once again. Just thinking about it back then would make me start sweating in fear. I decided to continue forward with it, and I wrote all of my slides, and I did the best that I could. I gave the presentation that I would want to see if I was new to that topic. I wanted people to leave with an understanding of what dependency injection was, why they might want to use it, and then kind of some examples, demonstrations, and then links of where they could go start implementing it themselves. I wanted them to feel excited about it as I was. And so that's the talk that I gave. And to this day, that's still the type of talk that I want to give. I want to give the talk where people are excited, they get something out of it. And mainly, at least my goal is that one person in that crowd gets something out of it. And if I can do that, then I've succeeded in my goal. At least one person gets something out of it. So I gave this talk, and to be honest, I remember walking on stage, and to this day, I remember walking out to my vehicle after completing, and then going home and sleeping for about 4 hours from exhaustion. I don't really remember anything from the talk. I have a glimpse of the crowd at one point, and that's all I have. I had a ton of people afterwards I know come up to me and say thank you and ask me a bunch of questions, get my email address, and so forth, which a lot of those ended up turning into opportunities, which is why I'm here talking to you today. Because I feel this is something that everybody needs to do. And was that my last talk? Oh, definitely no. It was an exhilarating rush afterwards, knowing that I had done that, being very proud of myself, moving forward in life with, accomplishing goals feels good. And that goal definitely felt good. And then helping people, though, that was the part that really made me feel good, is the fact that I was able to help all these people out there with a problem that they had, or they didn't even know that they had, and how to help make their life a little bit better. And so that's kind of the thing that I've always tried to aim for. Now, you may have different reasons why you may be contemplating public speaking. But what I want to talk about are a few points here that you need to think about if you're contemplating public speaking, or even if you're not, and you maybe just be kind of listening to this podcast here just to get some information. So I'm going to go through a couple of these items here and talk about why it's great to be out there in public speaking. So to kind of wrap up that story, I've eventually signed up for more code camps, more user groups. I've signed up to larger conferences, etc. So I've kind of spoken all over the place, and I'm going to give you some ideas of where you can start speaking at the end of this podcast today. So let's start off with number one. Why should you consider public speaking in your career, in your field? So inside of programming, namely Android. Well, number one, you're going to be in the public. And anytime that you're in the public, you're automatically naturally growing the number of people that know of you. There's a popular saying where people say, it's all about who you know. Actually, it's actually the inverse of that. It's not about who you know. It's about who knows you. Because as soon as someone knows you and that you can accomplish X, Y, or Z, or that's your expertise, they now know if they run into that problem that they can reach out to you and ask a question. A lot of times this has turned into various different opportunities for me, from consulting small or large projects to even connecting various different people within my network with different types of opportunities. And all these things kind of come back over time to help you out. As your network grows, the amount of things that happen in your life that are serendipitous kind of grow exponentially. And so you want to make sure you're out there and being in the public eye. And by speaking, you're naturally doing that. Even if you're in front of one person, or if you're in front of 100 or 1,000, you're in the public eye. One of the things that I like to have a lot of people think about when they start speaking is that you should you're not going to make everybody happy. There's always going to be that person in the crowd that knows more than you. And I think that's something that a lot of people are afraid of, that I don't know everything about this particular topic. I am not the master. And neither am I. There's very often times that I'll speak about a topic that I'm definitely not the master of that domain, but I know enough to be helpful. And so I figure, hey, I'm going to give a talk on it. And most people get scared and kind of afraid of being that person that's on stage. And there's always one, if not two people in the crowd that will say, well, what about X, Y, or Z, and some weird edge case that just would totally derail you. It happens almost every talk. Just sit back and watch. There's always somebody who asks some really stupid, super weird, obscure question. And why are they doing that? Who knows? Maybe they just want to deflect their knowledge. Maybe they want to see if they can prove you wrong. Maybe they want to, stir the pot. Who knows? What I do know is that if I don't know the answer, I just tell them I don't know the answer to that. But what I'll also do is I'll follow that up and I'll say, you know what? I don't know the answer to that, but how about this? Why don't you come down at to the stage afterwards or find me afterwards. I'll get your email address and I'll try to figure it out, or we could figure it out together, and I'll get back to you and I'll figure it out. And what that does is that actually builds rapport with the crowd that's there. So if you have a crowd of 50 people, 20 people, that's also you saying, look, I'm also human. Like, I don't know everything. And a lot of times people put a lot of speakers on pedestals of like, oh, these people are fantastic. They must know everything about these new libraries and these new projects, and they work with all these programming languages. And that happens very often. I'll be at a client and someone will say, hey, we're using this technology ABC or this library that does blah. And then I'll say, oh, wow, I've never worked with that library before. And I'll tell them that. And sometimes it comes as a surprise to them because of maybe I have a podcast or maybe I've written a book on a topic. Just because I've done something or have some success in one area doesn't mean I'm the master of all the domains. And I'll be very humble to admit that I don't know that. And I think that's very important to do, especially when you're on stage, because it builds rapport. It shows that you are human. Now, when you're on stage, you are basically the center of attention. People are beginning to know your name. They've seen your name on the speaker's list. They've seen your name maybe on the meetup site or wherever. They're coming to see you. They've looked you up online. Perhaps they followed you on Twitter. You're going to eventually grow your network, which means you should also kind of be promoting yourself too as well. Allow people to connect with you very easily. So if you mainly use Twitter or Instagram, or if it's email, whatever it is, you want to provide a way for people to get back a hold of you. And very often what I'll do is on a lot of my slides is I will just put my Twitter handle in the bottom right corner. So during any slide, if anybody wants to get a hold of me, they can use that Twitter handle. And my name is the same on Twitter and on Instagram and all these various different platforms. I try to keep that same name just so if anyone goes to any one of those social profiles, they're going to be able to easily find me. And if you have a website, you want to make sure that you have a contact page on your website. I can't tell you how many things have changed in my career because of that simple website and the blog, which is episode 154 we talked about, and what's come through that website. So you want to allow these people that are there in front of you to get a hold of you if they're going to have questions. Now you may be wondering like, well, okay, I'm not the expert in this field, but why would they get a hold of me? That's a very good question. The thing is, to a lot of people in that crowd, you are actually seen as the expert in the field. You have the guts to get up on stage in front of people, which again, most people don't have that desire to do. You have the guts to get up on the stage, explain a topic to your best of your ability, share your knowledge. They now see you as an expert in this field. Even if you're not the expert, you have some level of clout with them in that particular area that you were discussing. So what that ends up happening is that could be, this kind of goes back to the network and who knows you. Eventually, this could turn into something for you further on down the line. And a lot of people say, well, Donn, you speak, and you do these free public speaking engagements for years at a time, and you've never been paid for some of these, or you've been paid for your travel and your hotel or whatever, but you don't get paid. And they're right. I don't get paid for these things. I go out and I do these things and I share that knowledge. But here's the thing. This always comes back later on in life in one way or another. It's very serendipitous is the word I'll use here. Because right now I may go give a talk on, let's say dependency injection. I give the dependency injection talk on Android. And, here's the pattern. Here's how it helps solve you. Here's how it can save you money. Here's how it can help save you time, whatever. And then someone out there is watching this talk perhaps in the audience. And they think, wow, okay, Donn knows his stuff here. Cool. Awesome. And then they go back to work and they go back to work. And it could be that week or 2 weeks later, they say, hey, we want to do dependency injection. And say, well, I know of someone who can help us. Perhaps let's reach out to Donn to see if he can help us. That has happened. It's kind of rare that it happens that quick, but it does happen sometimes right away. What happens a lot of the time is all of a sudden that same person who saw me 2 years ago, 6 months, 12 months, whatever, 18 months ago, saw me at this talk, give this thing about dependency injection. They've moved on to the second or third company from then, or perhaps their relative who is a CTO of some company is running into a problem. And they're like, hey, you know what? I actually know a guy who knows exactly how to probably solve that problem. Let me get his info and I'll connect you. And all of a sudden you have this weird kind of connection through a talk that you gave, perhaps regarding the same topic or something similar, to a potential opportunity for you. This could be a new job. This could be a consulting opportunity. This could be a way to even maybe change careers if that's what you're interested in. But what it does basically is get you out there in the public, grows your network, and basically opens up doors that were perhaps you didn't even know were there. I can't tell you how many times this has happened in my life. Just even recently, I had a co-founder of a major company, which I'll not mention what they are, but let's just say there are many, many, many companies that you and I use every day that use their product. And the co-founder reached out to me through my blog saying, hey, we kind of found you. It looks like you might be able to help solve our problem. Here's what it is. And it's because I've been out there speaking. It's because I've written a blog. It's because I'm out there in the public. It's because I've been seen as an expert in that various different field. And so these are all different things that you can do. And those are all different reasons why you want to get out there. And furthermore, you're helping people. That's the big thing, is you're helping people. I have a blog post that's titled That One Person. So my goal is always to help one person in the crowd. If I have 50 people out there and I'm able to help one person in that crowd, then my job has been complete. If I can't help the other 49, I tried. It isn't what it is, but at least I was able to help that one person. Most likely, I'll help a lot more, but it's very often that you may not. It's could be either way. Depends on where you're going to be speaking at. Now, it's very often people think, well, I want to start speaking. That sounds cool, Donn. I want these nice serendipitous things to happen to me too. I want to grow my network. I want better opportunities. I want more doors to open for me. I want people to see me as an expert in the field. But I don't even know what to talk about. That's the same thing as blogging, actually. And here's the example I like to give. If this is an Android show, so very often you'll go to a DroidCon or some Android conference and you'll see a talk. And what's that talk on? The talk is on the Android Lifecycle. Something that you think has been dead for the last 10 years is still very active and alive because people still have problems with it. And so someone may have a new spin on how they're handling the Android lifecycle. And to me, I actually had this happen to me once. I saw that on one of the conferences I was going to. I thought, who's talking about like the Android lifecycle? And I wouldn't actually watch a talk, learned a lot. I'm like, wow, like even some of these topics, even I thought were like dead and no longer people are still using and want to hear about. And it was a very full crowd, actually. So anything you have experience in, you may perhaps want to use. So if you're using a new library that some other companies put out that no one's talking on, submit a proposal for that, and you could talk about how that library is helping you do something or whatever. Or maybe you found a way to, kind of get around a certain limitation using this cool little trick. You might be able to share that, or here's some lessons learned. Anything that you're working on can be of vast use to people out there. So various different topics that you can talk about. So again, these can be soft topics. They can be very deep, technical deep dives. They can be how-tos. They could be lessons learned. I did a talk called Android from the Trenches, where it's nothing but lessons learned from having 2 of my apps in the top 100 free category on Google Play, and the things that came along with that and things that I learned about development. And that was a popular talk. And so all different kinds of things that you can do. Doesn't mean you have to have a very popular app. You could have had something where you realized, here's a unique way to do X, Y, and Z. Now, let's talk about the locations of where you can speak. This is where a lot of people get hung up on because they see a lot of their favorite speakers speak at these large regional conferences, maybe mixed content conferences where they have various different like mobile tracks and ML and AI tracks, or they even see them at large conferences like GoTo conference or Devox, or maybe even industry conferences like Build or IO or something like that. They say, well, I want to go speak at a DroidCon, and they've never spoken before. That's quite, in my opinion, a high order. There's a lot of people that have spoken there for the first time at a DroidCon, but that can also be very stressful. I don't advise people to do that. What I advise most folks to do is find a local GDG, which is a Google developer group, in the case of Android, or even a local user group. So if you're not an Android dev, go find like a .NET user group or a Swift user group or something else. Or maybe a Kotlin user group. There's Java user groups all over the place. Find one of those. Those are pretty low barrier to entry. And say, hey, I'm now working with Kotlin. I've been working with it for the last 2 years. I'd like to talk to your Java user group about why I think it's cool, and here's some cool things that it can do. And most likely, if they haven't had a talk on it, they'll say, yeah, come on in. We're meeting, how about next month on the first Thursday of the month? Let's come in and let's do it. It's perfect. You'll be there and you'll get to meet and network and grow your network, perhaps make some new friends as well. And it's very low. When you start with these small local GDGs or user groups, or even like local meetups, which go to meetup.com and find something, it's very low pressure because you're just kind of getting out there, sitting amongst your peers, sharing what you learned. Again, Don't go in there acting like you know everything. Someone's going to be in the crowd that kind of pokes a hole in something you're doing. You can say, I don't know, or help them figure it out. But it's going to be low stress, and it's a great way to get your foot in the door to practice your craft of speaking. You can go a step further and go to local code camps like I did. And the code camps are very similar to these user groups because sometimes the crowds are going to be smaller. However, sometimes depends on where you go in the world, these code camps can be very large. So that's why I recommend GDGs or user groups first. So you can attempt the code camps, sign up, recommend a talk, see if you can get in from that point. At that point, usually I kind of recommend folks, you can start looking at the bigger conferences. But there's one thing that people don't do here that's even better than sometimes GDGs or user groups if you're still too nervous to sit among your peers. And that is local meetups that are outside of your area of expertise. Now, you may be wondering, what does that mean? What that means is, most likely if you're a mobile developer or developer in general, let's say you go to a barbecue with friends and family, someone finds out that you develop applications, say, oh, I got this idea for an app. We've all been there a million times. You're trying to find the quickest way out of that conversation usually. But what you do have is you do have a set of knowledge that most people don't have. And so you can share that set of knowledge with people that are outside of your direct peer group. And so what that means is perhaps you could find a real estate meetup on meetup.com or a finance meetup or something like that. And about, small businesses even, small business meetup. And you can go in and talk about, the different types of applications. Or perhaps here's one you could take for free. And everybody could use this. Do I need an app? It could be the name of your talk. And you could go give it to the local real estate meetup or the local finance meetup or the local small business meetup. And that would be very useful to all those people there because you could explain like, hey, well, how would you identify if you need an app or not? Okay. Does it need to do X? Does it need to do Y? Okay, well, those things could just be a simple website. You don't need an app for that. Okay, now you need this complex thing and you want to add VR. Okay, now we're talking. That's where you might want to use an app. And you can kind of, create a short little talk. It could be 5, 10, 20 minutes long and present it at a local, one of those local meetups that are out of your area of expertise because you're still going to be seen as an expert in your field because you have the knowledge that they don't have. So that's also a good way to get your foot into the door. Now, from here, we're going to step up to the bigger conferences where we have the regional conferences like the regional DroidCons. You have the DroidCon New York City, DroidCon SF, DroidCon London, DroidCon Italy, DroidCon Berlin. All of them are kind of vary in size. Some are larger than others, but usually they're pretty popular. And there's a lot of people that submit talks to them. And a lot of people want to speak, get frustrated with submitting to these conferences because it's very difficult to get in when there's so many people submitting proposals, especially when they're high-end speakers and they're just competing for a few slots. This, again, is why I recommend starting with local GDGs, code camps, meetups. This is exactly what I did. I started with those smaller areas first and kind of honed my craft there before I started stepping up to these larger conferences. And even if you are a decent, well-known speaker, you will be rejected from these regional and large conferences. It happens to a lot of folks. Don't get discouraged. So you can start speaking at these, regional conferences such as DroidCon or any of those things like that. Then at that point, you start to get into like these mixed content conferences / large conferences. And those are like GoToConf and like DevOps or NDC Oslo or, the Heartland Developers Group, Heartland Developers Conference, which is in the, middle of the United States where there's various different tracks where this one's mobile and this one's API and this one's ML and this one's, this track is for VR. And you kind of, sit in your siloed area of like, hey, I'm one of the mobile speakers. So I say that's kind of larger because a lot of those kind of get a lot of corporate sponsorship from various different organizations and have a lot of people come to them. So those are also fun. You can be seen as an expert in your field pretty easily there too. But it's kind of depends on really what conference it is. From there, you kind of really get, and again, those are, if I'm thinking like these smaller ones, these smaller like mixed content conferences, you go to the larger ones, just like GoToConf and DevOps. You kind of really need to have, you can submit out there, but sometimes you do need to have a name already made for yourself to make it to these larger conferences or be speaking on a topic that's so interesting that so few people have information on that you're already, well above everybody else in that area in regards to knowledge of the content. Lastly, you have the industry conferences such as like Google.io or Build or, anything like from Apple that they do. Some people say, well, I've seen some people speak at these events that aren't like Google employees. Yes, that has happened. Those are few and far between. Honestly, if that's your goal, you can have that as a goal and try to make it there, and hopefully you do. I wouldn't expect to go there straight out of the gate if you've never spoke yet. Again, you want to make sure you hone your craft. You want to make sure that you're developing quality presentations and so forth. So that's kind of the general synopsis about speaking. Just to recap, it's going to put you out there in the field. It's going to get you in front of the public. People are going to know you. It's not about who you know. It's about who knows you. And what's going to happen over time is these people are going to funnel back into your life in one way or another. Could be 2 weeks, could be 2 months, could be 2 years. For me, it's happened as far out as 4 or 5 years down the road. All of a sudden, I get a very lucrative contract because of something that I said a few years ago at a conference. You're automatically seen as an expert in the field when you're standing on stage in front of a bunch of people. You're doing something that most people are scared to death of. How you overcome that fear is up to you. For me, it was just going out and doing it and mastering that fear. And lastly, what it's really going to do is just open more doors for you and your career and your life in general. Nothing in my life has changed my life for the better than starting my blog and speaking in public. Those two things alone have changed my career for the better, bar none. So I hope that helps. Again, if you have any questions, you want any feedback, you're wondering if a conference is good or anything like that, feel free to hop into the comment thread on this post on Fragmented Podcast or hit me up at Donn Felker on Instagram or Twitter, and I'll do the best I can to help you out. Thanks. We'd like to say thank you to this episode's sponsor, Instabug. For all you listeners out there, if you go to instabug.com/fragmented, you can sign up for free, install the SDK, and you'll get Instabug's brand new t-shirt. Squash bugs in less than a minute with Instabug.
That's it for the show, folks. Fragmented is hosted by Donn Felker and me, Kaushik Gopal. We edit and produce all the episodes here on Fragmented. Sarah the Amazing Jackson from the Spec Network helps with production assistance and wraps our final mix. Our theme and ad music is by the national recording artist Blueprint from Weightless Recordings. You can find more Fragmented episodes at fragmentedpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you in the next episode.